having just celebrated my father's birthday on May 8th last Friday, I wish to make an addition to the biography that I've been developing on YouTube of my father, David Glenn Van Vactor, born in 1906.
Same year.
And but since I had bragged about getting him interested in being the one who got him interested in starting to use 12-tone technique in his musical compositions, I would like to talk about the way he used it, having studied with Arnold Schoenberg, who taught him classical harmony, not the 12-tone techniques that he had developed himself in his book called D.G.V.V, The Road. When I asked my father about it, sitting in his studio in front of the piano, he reached up on the bookshelf above and drew down the book called Die Reihe by Arnold Schoenberg and translated the first chapter from German to me. I was about 18 years old. And we had just come back that summer from Frankfurt, Germany, where he had a Guggenheim grant to write an opera and a Fulbright Research Fellowship to write a book on children's concerts in Frankfurt, Germany, which he was responsible for. And of course, he had a great series of children's concerts in Knoxville, Tennessee, which he arranged every year through the superintendent of the county schools and the city schools, both of whom were named Mildred. He had lunches with them every year, and these very capable women, and arranged the whole concerts and the busing of African American children from the county and city to the University of Tennessee gymnasium, where the symphony orchestra performed, and where he every year would award prizes for his tune contest, which was a city-wide contest that many children benefited from. And once he had chosen the tune, it might take him all night long, working all night until dawn, to copy out all the parts and his orchestration of the tune. And he'd copy out all the parts for the whole orchestra. And when he called the child from one of the public schools or the county schools to come up to the stage, walk up the steps, and receive his prize, and hear the whole symphony play his tune, it was quite an event. And it was exhausting to him because he'd literally be up till dawn to finish copying out all the parts. And anyway, after reading from the Schoenberg book called The Road, in translated into English, Die Reihe in German, he also reached up, and I'd given him the whole complete set of Grove Dictionary of Music for Christmas. He drew down that and he looked up the 12-tone theory, and we read through that so that I began to understand, and he would pick out on the piano and do make up a tune out of just the basic notes of the black keys, the minor keys, like minor, G minor, E minor, F sharp, A minor, G flat, which is a kind of a jazz. You make a jazz chord of that, and he would. And as soon as we returned from Germany, he got a letter from Robert Whitney, conductor of the Louisville Symphony Orchestra, uh, awarding him a commission to write a piece about 20 minutes long for the Louisville Symphony Orchestra to be played that coming fall. We were back in the end of August. He started teaching at the university in mid-September, and this is before I went back to school at Lawrenceville or Harvard. I think I was going to Harvard. That was my end of my freshman year at Harvard, 1957. So it took him only about 5 weeks to write that piece. One of his best pieces, Fantasia, Chaconne, and Allegro. And it was his first 12-tone piece he'd written. See if I can think of the two. Da 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 da, dee da dee da dee, da dee da dee. And then he could do a master plan of the row. This was an eight tone row, 8-note row, and he had a thick piece of cardboard, about 8 by 11, and on that he would paste a piece of lined music, a lined page of, on the far left margin there'd be the G clef and the bass clef, and there would be the 12 notes of the chromatic scale. You'd be one version of the row, the 8-tone row, 8-note row, would be up the chromatic scale of the page, and then there would be the inversion of that tone row, and then the retrograde inversion, so that there are basically 48 versions of this tune or theme. And this was his master plan, and he used this on a whole bunch of pieces. He used it on his episodes of the life of Christ, which is a large 40-minute piece for large orchestra and double chorus and soloists, and for his Walden Symphony, his choral symphony, Symphony Number 4, dedicated to me, David L. Van Vector, because in gratitude for my doing the job of choosing lines from Henry David Thoreau's, also a Harvard graduate, as I was, his great book, Walden, one of the classics of American literature. I chose the best lines and made a poem that was formed that the lyrics or the text of this choral symphony, Symphony Number 4 of my father. And he also went on to write. He used a tone row also for his 5th and 6th symphony, and for his 7th symphony. So he used it in the episodes, Jesus Christ. He used it in the Walden Symphony. He used it for, in about 5 works. He used the row, using this master plan with the 48 versions of the row that he chose to use, the tune that he chose to use, which was a tone row, modeled on the work of Schoenberg. Schoenberg had a rule which he stipulated in one of the first chapters of Die Reihe, that the composer should not repeat the row unless he had sounded every note in the row, or in whatever form, as in its in its chromatic in the chromatic scale of the row, or until he had sounded every note of the row, he should never repeat it. And I read something that Elliott Carter wrote, who lived to about 108, I think, writing 12-tone music right until the end, writing several pieces in his late 90s and maybe in his first years of his centenary year. He talks about the way to deal with this difficulty posed by Arnold Schoenberg, not to repeat the row until it sounded every note in it in one form or another. He talks about the way he proceeded to deal with the fact that the composer was not supposed to repeat all the notes of the row until it sounded every note in one form or another of the row. He talks about continuous development. I love that concept. I think it's a great concept. Continuous development. I mean, one knows that part of the sonata form is the development section after the first statement of the theme, and before its recapitulation. There's the development section. Well, Elliott Carter talked about continuous development. A concept I think is very useful and interesting. So you've got these 48 versions which can come out of. There was the Allegro version of my father's row of the Fantasia Chaconan Allegro. That's the inversion, and then there's the retrograde inversion. So you got 48.
How does the retrograde go?
I can't remember that. It was hard enough to remember the tune itself, but I did sound it out. I mean the row itself. Anyway, I think that's my attempt to explain 12-tone theory, and not being a professional musician, it's a little bit maybe beyond my capacity. However, I did as well as I could. I hope it's clear what I've said so far. And I thus conclude my discussion of how I got my father to go back to using Schoenberg's 12-tone theory in about 5 of his pieces. The Episodes for Jesus Christ, the 5th Symphony, 6th Symphony, and 7th Symphony. He also wrote a wonderful woodwind quintet using 12-tone, which is one of my favorite pieces of it. And he also wrote the orchestral versions of his opera, which he never wrote, around its characters, the children and women, Hecuba, Polyxena, Cassandra, the prophetess, and he wrote 5 pieces of the 12 Trojan women using 12-tone, and they're brilliant pieces. Some of his absolute best pieces. He deserves to be better known, and I'm hoping to introduce France Musique to his Symphony in D, which won the New York Philharmonic Prize, and he conducted in New York in 1939, 6 weeks after I was born, on November 17th of 1938. In his Symphony in D, he sounds a 10-note chord that is rather dissonant, and it forms the whole kind of, even though he wasn't using 12-tone technique for the symphony in D, it sounds the sort of the harmonic basis of that symphony, that 10-note chord, slightly dissonant chord, minor chord. Beautiful, beautiful moment in the piece, which you can hear on the scherzo movement. Anyway, thank you for your patience, and I now conclude this addendum to my father's biography, which how many hours have I been on? On YouTube. I wanted also to explain, I have one section of the video tube biography is called High Hurdler.
It's called YouTube. Anyways.
The reason I talk about High Hurdler is that my father was a great trackman, and he did the 100-yard dash in 10 flat, which is nothing compared to what Carl Lewis could do it in, or even a friend of mine who did it, I think, in 4.8. 10 seconds is not a fast 100-yard dash, but he also had he could high jump his height, and I don't know how much pole vaulting he did, but or even the long jump. But he was in a fraternity at Northwestern University called the Go-Getters, and they used to have intramural track meets, and he talked about how people would chase him who was competing against, yelling, trying to edge him with their shoulder off the track, into the cinders, and but a high hurdle is about, I would say, about 1 meter high, and if you catch your foot going over, it will move so you don't trip and land on your face. It has a way of, when you go over it, you can pull down the side of it so you don't trip on it. It's a metaphor for somebody who had great ambitions and high ambitions and met some. I mean, he was such an optimist. I mean, when I asked him, when he was 87 years old, I said, "Daddy, what do you think? You've been around 87 years. What do you think of this life?" His answer was, "Wonderful." And that's the way he was. And then I also once asked him, I said, "I know you think a lot about your hometown Argus. What do you think about when he was spending many hours alone in his room, and when after he came back from Tennessee to Los Angeles and lived in Century City, and my mother had a lot of time to himself." And I said, "What do you think about?" And he said, "Mama's cooking. All the recipes, her 1-egg cake and all sorts of other wilted lettuce and all sorts of things she would do with a kind of country mayonnaise or hollandaise, which you make with a little vinegar instead of with lemon or olive oil. Just the grease of that you use on wilted lettuce and mix in a yolk of an egg probably." And then I also said, "Daddy, you've written so much wonderful music. You must feel proud of what you did." He said, "No," he said, "I'm not proud." He said, "What is the old saying? Pride cometh before the fall." He said, "I'm just grateful for what I've been able to do." And he would put at the end of every piece in Solo Dei, to the glory of God, which is, I guess, what Bach put at the end of all his pieces. Solo Dei Gloria. Oh, that was my dad. And I have pictures of him, beautiful pictures of him. And a picture which was taken when he was about 67, which is really a real beauty. He's a handsome man. and, and not proud. He believed in perseverance, patience. He always prayed for patience and perseverance, and he did have he had extraordinary energy and determination, and he wrote over 100 pieces of music, many concertos and 36 pieces for woodwinds, uh, three string quartets, many great choral works, about 10 pieces for concert band, and one of them, 4 etudes, also a 12-tone piece, 4 etudes for winds and percussion, which is like a band symphony, and has a great, he did his master's thesis at Northwestern on the art of the fugue by Johann Sebastian Bach, and he was, in that piece, 4 etudes, it ends with 4 fugues. That were fabulous ending, great, and then one of his great pieces, the Sinfonia Breve, is a 12-tone piece, and it ends. It's marked crescendo poco a molto, little by little, to forte. It has as many as 7 voices sounding in its great crescendo, and that great crescendo that it ends. It's the number that was always in his mind when he was writing that was the number 19, which is not a prime number, and a complicated number. You could break into several, nines and tens and fives and fours and so on. And
why 19?
I don't know. He was just sort of obsessed with the idea of that number, because writing music is a kind of numerology. I mean, numbers are always in your mind. You're talking about 7th chords, 9th chords, 11th chords, and especially when you're doing with 12-tone technique. I mean, you're dealing with the chromatic scale and all the 48 versions of the row and everything. And I mean, it's so exciting. That part, I mean, I'm fascinated by numbers myself, and I've been thinking a lot about the fact that my grandfather could do mental algebra in his head with an 8th grade education, and he used a lot of math in his application for patent for his airplane that could fly straight up and then horizontally. The seat of the air in the pilot's seat on a swivel, and so that you could be sitting there, and then from the vertical position, once you go into horizontal flight, this was really copied by the Navy before the patent ran out. He got 5 claims on that patent, which he taught himself patent law and wrote it up on his.
You're talking about your grandfather.
My grandfather, David Ellsworth, Van Vactor. He got 5 claims on that patent. The Navy copied it before the patent ran out. I think it was 17 years. You had for a patent before it expired, and they came out with the pogo stick, and so this airborne vehicle could just be on a battleship and just take off straight off the deck and then go vertical. I mean, I think
you mean take off vertically.
Vertical and then go horizontal.
Horizontal.
So he could do mental algebra, and I've been thinking a lot about mental arithmetic and using just these little numerical couples of couples like 3s and 5s and 2s and 3s and 6s and 7s, and just playing with the numbers. And so you take a big number like 678 and you break it into these little increments of small numbers, either twos, threes, fives, sixes, and sevens, and manipulate it that way, or just deal with tens. I mean, if you hear with 19, given a number with 19 in it, or divisibles coming to 19, you just break them into tens and fives and tens, numbers that you can easily manage in your head. So that finishes my addendum to my father's biography. Thank you for your patience.